Bush beans are one of the more popular crops here in Oklahoma gardens for fall planting. They really make a nice crop not only for fresh beans, but also for canning or for freezing or however you wish to process them. However, like many of our seeds that we sow or plant in the fall, we have to really be concerned about high soil temperatures. Sometimes when we have our temperatures so high in the daytime, up to the high 90s and 100, coupled with a high light intensity, we may see that the soil temperature at the surface actually reaches about 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's certainly too hot for many of these seeds to germinate and to do well. Certainly, temperature, moisture, oxygen, and light are important for germination, but we need to have those as optimum as possible. And so what we're wanting to do on many of our fall crops is try to reduce the soil temperature to encourage germination and quick emergence. Now, where I'm planting the green beans today, we've had a nice rain here, almost an inch of a rain within just the last few days. So I'm not concerned about soil moisture so much, and even the soil temperature itself right now is relatively cool. But I still went ahead and soaked my bean seed for a few hours prior to planting because this will enhance germination, and I prepared my rows in advance. I came in a few hours earlier and opened up the rows and incorporated fertilizer into there, much like we did when we planted the southern peas last week. Now, one of the things that we want to do now, though, is quickly as possible is to cover these bean seeds so we do protect them from the temperatures as it's getting hotter today, and then put some sort of a covering over the row to help reduce this soil temperature. I'm going to cover them about 3/4 inch deep, which will give them some protection, of course, from the high temperatures with this moist soil, but then also knowing that it's supposedly is still very much summertime here in Oklahoma. We're still in for many days of high temperatures. So I'm going to put some protective coverings over these rows. One of the tips that I may give you that I like to use is simply using old building scrap material. Now this is some strips of styrofoam insulation board that we've cut into about 6 or 8 inch widths and can fashion those sort of in a teepee fashion over the plant row, and will certainly reduce that soil temperature. Now, just so that it will be a little bit stabilized in the wind and the elements, I'll put a few garden stakes along there to give it a little bit of support. Now, I have to keep in mind that this is shutting out most of the light from where these seedlings will be emerging. So I want to check these very often, and as the seedlings begin to emerge, and then remove these so if they can get adequate light in there. Another tip that you might want to use in reducing the soil temperature over some of the seeds that you're planting is to use just hardware wire or screen wire. Now this is wire here that's available at most hardwares or most building supply stores. It's just ordinary screen wire. This particular one here has about a 30% shade effect. You can get them all the way up to 50 or 60% shade effect, but I would not recommend going at least any higher than a 50% shade if you're going to use these as row covers to reduce soil temperature. I had cut this at about 18 inches in width, and then earlier doubled it so I can use it then, much like I have my other row cover, in somewhat of a teepee fashion. And I like just a little bit here of covering this row up. And so I can come in now and fasten this over or place this over the row in a loose fashion like this, and it really reduces the light underneath there. Now furthermore, if I want to stabilize it, all I need to do is put a little bit of soil along the edge there, and I won't have to be concerned about the wind or a rain, should we be fortunate enough to get one, to destroy my little tent or row cover that I've made. Now the advantage of this particular material is that it does let light in there, and so you can keep it over the row for as long as you wish, or at least until it starts interfering with the growth of the plant. Well, there are some other ways that you may want to look at to reduce soil temperature other than using row covers such as this. One way is simply to use an insulation over the seed that we've planted. And in this case, I'll be using well-rotted compost. You could use peat moss, well-rotted sawdust, or any loose material that has an insulation effect. In this manner, I will just slightly cover the bean seed, cover them only about half as deep as I normally would, and then following that with a pretty good insulation layer, or layer of insulation of my mulch material here. This will not only hold moisture in the row, but also will tend to cool the soil temperature and thereby reducing that temperature around the seed, or holding it very closely to perhaps the temperature that it is at the present time. So there are some ways that you can fight these high soil temperatures, and that's certainly an important thing to consider when you're planting any type of vegetable in the fall garden. Now, as these beans begin to emerge through this mulch here, and I have a little bit of a ridge left on my row, I can go in and continue to pull that soil over, and by the time we have a good stand or a good seedling emergence there, my row then will be about the same level as the rest of the middle is. Well, let me talk to you just a minute or two about some other things that you may want to use this screen wire for, because there are some excellent ways you can use that. For example, later on you're going to be wanting to set some transplants in the fall garden, either tomatoes, if you have some tomato transplants you're wanting to set, or cabbage, broccoli, and cauliflower. And you can simply cut squares out of the screen wire, fold those squares over, and make a nice little tent or teepee to put over individual transplants such as this. Or another thing you may want to do is take some of the screen wire and cut it into strips such as this, fold it into a roll or a column, use a clothespin to hold it at the top, and then just simply set this over one of your transplants that you may be wanting to set into your garden. And again, stabilizing it with some soil to hold it upright. And you've got a nice collar there to give you a little bit of protection from maybe some rodent damage that you might have, or rabbit damage, and then certainly give you a nice shading protection there for those transplants. So I think one of the things we really want to be concerned about when we're planting in the fall garden, here at this time of the year particularly, is trying to reduce these soil temperatures and giving these plants and these seeds a good head start so that they can get off to a very vigorous start and make nice growth in order for us to get a good produce display before fall.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.